Okay, we are now finally at the end of the regular season for the 2021 season. The New England Patriots have one more game to go before they turn their attention to the postseason. And it all depends on what happens in week 18 as far as where the Patriots are going to go and who they're going to play. Evan Lazar, of course, joining us from CLNS Media Network. You can catch the Patriot programs on YouTube as well at Patriots Press Pass. So, Evan, last week you talked about how important it was for the Patriots to pretty much blow out Jacksonville the way they blew them out. Which is, they've got to just get this 2-game losing streak off their backs and look ahead. And if they're really a contender, just get rid of this team early. And it needs to be like, one of their jet blowouts or one of those other blowouts from earlier this season. And that's what happened. And they accomplished what they needed to accomplish last week. And now as we enter the final week of the regular season, it still looks like it could be the Bills and the Patriots playing in the first round, which is something we talked about last week. But it also depends on where it's going to be played. And if the Patriots lose to the Dolphins, which is more likely than the Jets beating the Bills, then maybe the Patriots could play the Bengals, right?
Yeah, the Patriots could still fall all the way down, I believe, to the 7 seed. They can't fall out of the playoffs, obviously. They've already clinched a playoff spot. But I think that they could be 6 or 7, 5, 6 or 7 in that wild card trio there. Now, I think what you mentioned with the Jaguars, it was really key. In listening to Bill Belichick this morning as well, saying he was asked a question about resting players potentially in this game against Miami and taking the foot off the gas and essentially using this Dolphins game as a pseudo bye, at least for some of the banged up players on the Patriots. For instance, somebody like Damian Harris, who's been dealing with that hamstring issue on and off since the Buffalo game, the first Buffalo game. Maybe this is a week where they allow Ramondre Stevenson to run the ball 25 times instead of Damian Harris being a factor. But I think overall, Belichick's mindset going into this game is they want to stay on track with what they've been doing, is what he said this morning, in terms of keeping this positive momentum moving forward. Sure. And I think when you look at this team in particular, with a rookie quarterback and some other younger, newer players that haven't been around for the dynasty years and haven't won Super Bowls with the Patriots, there are, for every Devin McCourty and Dante Hightower, there's a Kendrick Bourne and a Nelson Aguilar and some of these other guys that haven't been around. So I think the biggest thing is with this team, we've noticed that they are an up and down bunch depending on how things are going. The confidence is a big thing for this team. And when they beat the Jets earlier in the year, 54-13, they rattled off 7 straight wins. And you could see that positive momentum, they rode it every single week. They rode it in and out of every single game that they played. And then they lose a game in Indianapolis that I think took them a little bit by surprise, how poorly they played.
But that came off the bye.
Yes.
The bye is really what stopped the momentum.
Yeah, the bye did seem to kill their momentum.
And maybe that's a lesson that you don't want to kind of go into this game and treat it like a bye type game because of exactly what happened after the bye.
Yeah, I think that you look at the passing game in that game in particular against Indianapolis, they only threw the ball 3 times against Buffalo the week before the bye. Then they go into the bye week, and the first half against the Colts, the passing game is disjointed and all over the place. So I think that that's an indication that this is a momentum-based Patriots team at the moment. This is a front-running team, quite frankly. When things are going their way, when they're leading, even in the individual game, when they get out to a good start and they're leading early and they can play their style of game where Mac Jones can stay in manageable situations and it's not a 20-point deficit or it's not a fourth quarter deficit that they have to overcome, and they can play from ahead and they can integrate the running game and mix it up offensively and don't give up any big plays or backbreakers defensively, they can be a very, very difficult football team to beat. But when they get behind, it's a little like quicksand. They get themselves buried very fast in a lot of these games that they lose, and they have a tough time digging out of that hole, and then that can snowball on them. So I think this week in particular is another week, just like last week against Jacksonville, where they're just going to want to kick the crap out of Miami and try to get again, try to keep this momentum rolling. I think that that's going to be a big thing and a big message from Bill Belichick against a Miami team that's much better than Jacksonville and can do some things, especially with their defense, with pressure, with man coverage, that I think could give the Patriots offense some problems. So I think that that's a good litmus test in a lot of ways, and a good warm up to what they're going to face in the playoffs. Is a team in Miami that's going to come after Mac Jones, that's going to play man coverage in the back end and make those Patriot receivers get separation and create opportunities down the field. It's something that the Patriots in these games against Indy and against Buffalo have struggled with at times to defeat, is that style of game plan. So this is a very good practice for the Patriots against a team that knows how to scheme it up defensively, knows them very, very well, obviously with Brian Flores. And maybe this does get them ready in a lot of ways for the playoff game in a couple weeks.
Well, look, Miami beat the Patriots week 1. So it's not like, look, this is a team, and we've talked about it for the past month. This is the location as well and the time of the year that hasn't been kind to New England, mostly. When you compare it to a lot of other teams. It's not that the Dolphins have owned the Patriots. It's just that
they've owned the Patriots in Miami in December and January over the Belichick era. 2-7. The Patriots are in Miami.
In that spot. Okay.
Yeah, they've lost a lot of games down there. In the Ryan Tannehill era, I want to say Tannehill rattled off 4 or 5 straight wins against the Patriots at one point down in Miami. And then they also had that game in 2018, the Miami Miracle. It's not a good place to play if you're Bill Belichick, and the Patriots notoriously, even before Bill Belichick, the Patriots as an organization have struggled down in Miami. And this week, at least so far today on Wednesday, we'll see about Thursday and Friday, the Patriots are practicing inside their bubble at the practice facility. And apparently the plan is to crank as much heat into the bubble as they possibly can to try to simulate the Miami Heat, because I think a big part of the reason why the Patriots fade in these games against the Dolphins, because the Miami Miracle game is a perfect microcosm in one game of all the things that have gone wrong for the Patriots down there in the past. And that is, they were leading at halftime. I want to say they were leading by 2 touchdowns at halftime of that game. And they end up losing the game at the end on the final play. But the whole second half was dominated by the Dolphins. And you saw a different Patriots team in the second half than in the first half. And I think that weather is a big factor. And Devin McCourty said yesterday that it's a shock to the system when you go from New England winter and it's 30 degrees in Foxborough, and then it's 80 degrees on game day in Miami. It's hard to rally, for that.
Sure. So, well, the temperature right now is 70. Is on Sunday. It's supposed to be 78, 80% humidity. Which again, it's not 90% and 90, but like you said, there's a big difference.
Opposite. Yeah, I can tell you it's polar opposite of what we're getting up here. Right now.
And then, but this is the key here, which I'm not sure it's not going to affect Tua because he doesn't throw the ball deep. To tell you the truth, it doesn't really affect the Patriots passing game as well. But they're calling for the winds to be as close up to 20 miles an hour.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that could definitely come into play if the winds are east at 18 miles an hour, as it's supposed to be right now on Sunday.
Yeah, it's a really interesting matchup for the Patriots because there's a lot of demons down there. You mentioned the week 1 game where Miami did some things that gave them problems, especially, I would say more so offensively. The Patriots shot themselves in the foot a lot in that game against the Dolphins in week 1. They had the ball in field goal territory, and Damian Harris fumbled the game away at the end of the game with an opportunity to kick the game-winning field goal or go in for a touchdown and win the game that way. So they had the ball late in the game with a chance to win it, and they coughed up the football and gave it away. I think defensively, the more frustrating part about that game in week 1 was how easy they allowed Tua and Parker and Waddle to beat them on underneath routes. No one's afraid of Tua throwing the ball down the field. He hit 2 throws in that game down the field, but they were both heaves that I think Parker caught both of them, over the defender and had to go and make a basketball catch, a contested grab in between the two defenders. And if those one or two of those a game happen against you, then whatever, right? Sure. I don't really think the Patriots are going to be too concerned about that. It's the slant throws, it's the RPO concepts with the underneath routes, and it's the yards after the catch that really hurt the Patriots in that game. So we'll see what they game plan for this time around. I think it's going to be a much different game plan. In the first matchup, they played a lot of cover 3 zone, and what was happening was the outside corners were bailing on the line of scrimmage, and the Waddle, Parker, these guys are just running slants, right?
Okay.
Quick 3-step slants, and they have these corners that are 8-9 yards of cushion off the line of scrimmage, and the ball, it's just too easy, right? Sure. So especially when you have a guy like Waddle who can then take a 3-yard slant and turn it into a 80-yard touchdown. Yeah. You got to be careful with those types of plays against Miami. So I don't know if it's press man coverage. I don't know if it's a different type of zone, like a cover 2 zone that allows them to keep those 5 defenders underneath or 4 defenders underneath the defense instead of putting everybody a 3 deep zone where everybody gets pushed back. I'm not sure exactly where they go with it, but it will definitely be a much different game plan this time around. I'm sure they will absolutely dare to beat them over the top. So
well, this is what we've talked about with Belichick, and you stress a lot is that if you know that the opposition has a main, something that they have to implement in their offensive game plan in order for them to be successful, well, Belichick can take that away. And that's basically what the Dolphins. The Dolphins are pretty predictable offensively at this point right now because Tua is still developing. So they're basically just, look, we got to, and they're smartly, let's just do what works best with Tua right now. And that's what they're doing. Maybe at some point when they could run the ball a little bit better, when they have a much better offensive line, when they have better weapons all across the board, they can open things up a little bit more. But right now they can't do that.
Yeah, they are an RPO and quick game offense, right? They run a lot of RPO. Run a lot of play action. They run a lot of motion. Guys coming in motion. They'll bring Waddle in motion, and they'll use him as either a motion receiver to throw him the ball on the move, or sometimes even as a decoy, where they bring him in motion and they have everybody key on 17, and then they throw the ball elsewhere. They roll the pocket, they move the pocket a ton, and then they run those quick game concepts where he's just throwing a slant, or he's throwing a little curl, or he's throwing a hitch route to the outside, and it's just the ball's out quickly. And everything that Miami does seems to happen in a 10-yard area of the line of scrimmage in the passing game. Yeah. And then occasionally, maybe once or twice a game, I think Tua has 28 throws the entire year beyond 20 yards past the line of scrimmage, which is 30th among 32 quarterbacks, the full-time starters this season. Occasionally he'll throw a heave up for Parker or Waddle down the field. And when you
like
watch
you said,
him,
you just give it to him if they get it.
Yeah, when you watch him, like he hit a 55-yarder, I think it was, to Waddle last week against the Titans. And if you watch the throw, it takes every single muscle and ounce of weight that Tua has in his body to get the ball down there. And Waddle's behind the defense, so if he can actually put it out in front of Waddle, it's probably a touchdown. But instead, it ends up being, I think, a 55-yard completion because he maxed out his arm. That was as far as he possibly could throw the ball. I think a lot of people saw on Twitter that play go around that he rolls out to his left, his arm side, and he bounces the ball at the receiver's feet. I saw a couple of those on tape where he's trying to drive the football down the field, and if his feet aren't perfectly set and he's not able to really step into it and give the ball, give it a go, the ball just dies and it bounces 2-3 feet in front of the receiver instead of getting to his target. So the Patriots, I think, are going to play man in this game, I would anticipate, and play some cover 2 zone maybe on early downs against the RPOs and really force to beat them throwing into tight windows past 10 yards. If he drives the ball 15 yards down the field and somebody makes a play on it, then I don't think if you're the Patriots, you expect him to consistently be able to make that throw. The only question that I have from a New England's perspective is back to what Belichick said this morning, which was we need to continue with what is working for us and continue this momentum. I don't know how much man coverage they're necessarily going to play if they draw some of these really high-powered offenses that they might draw in the postseason.
Yeah, of course.
If they
Yes.
play Cincinnati, if they played Buffalo, if they play Kansas City, I don't think that you're going to try to
No.
roll J.C. Jackson and Jalen Mills and Miles Bryant against Tyreek Hill and
No.
Travis Kelce and that group, or even Chase and Boyd and Higgins and Mixon and those players in Cincinnati, or Diggs and company in Buffalo. It seems like those game plans will be extremely zone heavy from the Patriots if they play those and back off, keep everything in front of you, try to make them beat you, by going 10, 12, 13 play drives instead of one play down the field. If that's going to be the case, then maybe they try to implement that against Miami and perfect it so they have a good rhythm with it and they have a good understanding. But to beat the Dolphins, if they're just focused on winning this week and just beating the Dolphins, then I do think that they will play some man coverage and force Tua to beat them down the field.
Well, look, I think you have to do that. Look, we could kind of joke about it, but Patriots Bills matchup over the years have told us, and it told us again this year, that the Patriots just perform better in Buffalo and vice versa, and the Bills perform better in New England. So, hey, you know what? The Patriots have to go up to Buffalo and play them. That's okay. I mean, that's better, isn't it? But logically, it's not. You want to have the home field. It's a playoff game. Playoff games are different than the regular season.
Right.
And because of that, I definitely think that Patriots are going to play this game to win, because, and that's the first thing that they're going to try and do. But I think what will, first of all, the Bills Jets game. What time is that game? Is that a 4:00 game as well?
Yeah, they moved them both to 4:00, so it's happening simultaneously. So I mean, look, there's a chance that if the Jets are winning, or if the Bills are winning 40-0 at halftime, and Bill goes into the locker room and somebody taps him on the shoulder and says, just to let you know, the Bills are winning by 4 touchdowns.
Sure.
That maybe the second half game plan. I'm not saying they'll bench Mac or anything like that, but maybe some of the guys that are veterans that are banged up on the roster, they pull off the field and say, we're going to let the young guys bring us home here this week or something like that. But until that point, I do think they'll play it straight up and they'll play to win the game. Yeah.
Yeah. Because look, I'll tell you this. What happened last week with the Jets and Tampa Bay was not like some sort of fluky, the Bucs just didn't care. And what I say that for is because Zach Wilson played the best game of his career so far.
Yeah, and they ran the ball really well against Tampa too, and that's the Buffalo.
And they've run the ball well the last 4 weeks.
Right.
So they're getting into a groove now. This is what happens with young teams, and you have a new system. The longer you go in the season, the more eventually things will start working out for you if you're coached properly and you have the right talent and so forth and so on. That's what's going on with the Jets right now, is they're playing their best football of the season. Now, that doesn't mean Zach's going to play well on Sunday because he's a rookie, so anything's possible. But if Zach plays the way that he plays against Tampa Bay, that's going to be a 4-quarter football game because he was playing fantastic. But that doesn't mean that they're going to win, and it doesn't mean anything else other than the Patriots will play the game, like you said, until they know otherwise, that it's out of their reach, because there will be a possibility, especially since the Bills struggled for 2.5 quarters against the Falcons last week at home. There's a possibility that that game could be close, and therefore Patriots might be able to somehow miraculously steal a home game in the first week.
Yeah, and just looking at the schedule, otherwise, I think the Bengals play at 1:00, and the Chiefs play on Saturday at 4:30. So this is not going to happen. But there is a crazy scenario where if the Titans and the Chiefs and the Bills all lose this weekend, the Patriots would be the number 1 seed in the conference.
Yes.
It's not going to happen, but that Bill Belichick doesn't think it's not going to happen, right? He's thinking, okay, well, there's at least a chance. And if there's a chance, then I'm always going to care about the game and I'm always going to play. So the Bengals, the Titans, and the Chiefs all play before that 4 o'clock window. The Chiefs are a Saturday game, and the Bengals and the Titans are in the 1 o'clock window on Sunday. So those three teams will have already wrapped up their seasons, their regular seasons, at least at that point. So then you would kind of have an understanding of, okay, yeah, maybe we could flip flop with the Bills and bring that game to Foxborough if the Bills were to get upset by the Jets. But where our seating is going to be, what our matchup is going to be, and that's like all the fun that's going to happen, right? Because at 4 o'clock, we're essentially going to know more or less by 7:30 or whatever it ends up being Eastern time, who the Patriots are playing and where they're going on Wild Card Weekend, especially if they beat Miami themselves, then they can't be any lower than the 5 seed, so they'll be able to figure it out based off of the results of the other 4 games. So,
by the way, I don't know, but you can double check this. But when I was going over my notes, and it's possible because if teams obviously lose at the top and then move up, and you have now additional tiebreakers that weren't going into what we see now. I thought I read that it doesn't matter what the Bengals do. That if the Bills lose, the Chiefs lose, and Tennessee loses, New England gets the first seed.
That could be correct. Yeah. That could be correct.
Not that again. We're just these things aren't going to happen.
I mean, the Titans are playing the Texans.
Yes.
So they're not going to lose to Houston.
No.
And yeah,
not with a chance to get the number 1 seed.
Yeah, no. I think I saw the stat out there from one of the books is that the 3 teams the Patriots need to lose to earn the number 1 seed are all 10+ point favorites this weekend to win their games. The Chiefs, the Titans, and the Bills. They're all, significant favorites.
Well, just imagine, you know what? Go ahead, go on your sports book and place like a $5 parlay with those teams losing and see how much money you would make.
Yeah.
That's how the odds are that'll happen.
Yeah. But look, beyond all the standings and stuff like that, I think the biggest thing for the Patriots in this game is playing a good football game.
Yes.
Because they played a good football game against, I know it's the Jaguars, but when you beat a team 50-10 in
what
the
else
NFL,
can you do? Yes.
What else can you do? I looked, Football Outsiders said that the Jaguars Patriots game was the second most lopsided victory for a team in the NFL all season long. So regardless of what you think of the Jaguars, and they're terrible, don't get me wrong, but the Patriots beat the Jaguars worse than anybody else has beaten the Jaguars all season long, right? So they really stuck it to Jacksonville. So this week, it's another week where you want to do as much as you possibly can to give yourself some mojo, some positive momentum going into the postseason. And I think in particular, looking at Mac Jones, last week against Jacksonville, Mac is dancing. He's jumping up and down. He's fist pumping. He's doing all sorts of making it rain after touchdowns. He's loving life, beating up on Jacksonville. He didn't take the cheese, but I do think it mattered to him a little bit about beating Trevor Lawrence. I think he wanted to beat Lawrence. I think that was the final. The final hurdle for him to be like, I was the best rookie quarterback, right? Not only did I play the best statistically and my team's going to the playoffs, but then I just beat Trevor 50-10. I beat Zach 54-14. Like, nobody can say anything about it anymore. Like, I'm the best rookie quarterback. I think that did matter to him. And he was dancing. He was laughing with Bill Belichick on the sidelines. They're joking back and forth when Brian Hoyer's in the game in the fourth quarter of the blowout. And that was a different Mac than the Mac that we saw when they lost to Buffalo and they lost to Indianapolis. Those 2 weeks, he was down on himself. His head was down, mopey, sad, all that, everything you would expect after a loss. And I do think it's important to see. I compared it to like a basketball player that's in a shooting slump. And then one game, he finally sees a couple threes go through the bottom of the net. And all of a sudden, the dam breaks. Or like a baseball hitter that hasn't had a hit in 10 games. And then he has 5 in one game. And then he goes on a 30-game hitting streak, right? That's sort of what you're looking for if you're the Patriots and if you're Mac Jones. So Miami is a good defense. Is a much better defense than Jacksonville. So if he can go out there and make some plays against this Dolphins defense and lead the Patriots to a win, then I think that the momentum really starts to swing heavily in his favor, and maybe the Patriots can make some noise. But We're a long way to go from the Patriots making any noise in the playoffs, and I still am wary of some of the fatal flaws of this team, especially at the pass catcher positions on offense. I don't know if they have enough firepower yet to go up against a good defense with a good, a team like Buffalo, a team like Cincinnati that has it all together in a lot of different ways on their roster, especially Buffalo, because that seems to be the matchup it's most likely going to be. That is an offense with Josh Allen that you have to score. You're not going to win the game like they did in the windstorm. You're going to have to score some points. You're going to have to get into the 20s offensively, maybe even the high 20s or low 30s to have a chance to beat Josh Allen. And that's a very, very good Buffalo defense. So I really think that this week for Mac Jones is as big of a week as he's had all season long to go up against the Miami defense that is going to bring pressure, that's going to know some of your tendencies because of Brian Flores' familiarity with the system, that's going to play some man coverage in the back end. And let's see how the Patriots respond to it and if they have some answers and they have some ways to get Mac rolling against a good defense.
We'll talk more about this next week, but the opponent that the Patriots want to play the least in round 2, if they win a round 1 matchup, would be the Chiefs, correct?
Yeah, so I don't think they can play. There might be some crazy permutations where they could end up playing Kansas City on the wild card round, but I don't think that that's very possible, if I remember correctly. If you're talking about the wild card round, I look from a aesthetic standpoint, from a reporter standpoint, playing Buffalo is the game. That game would be fantastic theater. To play Buffalo a third time, especially with, I would say, the fan bases and the teams, that's really starting to become a rivalry. And I think that the Patriots understand, I'm talking about Patriots fans now, understand that the Bills are going to be around for a while with Josh Allen. The Patriots should be around a while now that they have Mac Jones. And this is a different rivalry in the division that the Patriots have had in a really long time because they've never really been even with a team before in the division. And maybe Buffalo is still a little bit better than they are, but they've never been in the same ballpark. It's either the Patriots are with Tom Brady and they're a juggernaut and nobody in the division is close, or it's the Patriots are in the dumpster and it's Dan Marino in Miami's time, or it's Jim Kelly in Buffalo's time, or whatever the case may be. So the fact that they have a legitimate threat and a legitimate opponent in the division, in the AFC, that should be there for the next 5 to 10 years along with you, that's a lot of fun. And I think that the fan bases are starting to get salty. They're starting to really hate each other, and the back and forth on Twitter and things like that is starting to happen a lot more. Obviously, they split the season series, and that's a big part of it as well. So that game we would do insane numbers. That's all I know. It would be it would be fantastic in terms of the coverage and the build up and all of that. So the game itself, I think, would be a heavyweight true playoff game. That's not going to, if the two of those teams play together, that's not going to be a blowout. Nobody's winning that game by 3 touchdowns. That's going to come down to the last possession in the fourth quarter and be a true back and forth type of game. But if I'm a Patriots fan, the team that I would want to draw on the wild card round is Cincinnati, because as good as their weapons have been and as good as Burrow has been, that is a young team with a quarterback getting his first taste of the playoffs and his first taste of Bill Belichick all in one game.
And you have a rookie, and basically a rookie playoff head coach in Zach Taylor.
You look at Zach Taylor versus Bill Belichick would probably be the biggest mismatch in the playoffs.
Yeah.
And I think that you feel good about the X's and O's and the game planning and the brain trust of New England being able to just outclass Cincinnati in a playoff game. I think Cincinnati might have, especially offensively, have a lot more roster talent than the Patriots do, but I don't think that ultimately would matter. So if I had to pick a team that I would want the Patriots to play just so that they could win the game, it would be Cincinnati. But the theater of playing Buffalo would be fantastic. I'm all for that.
If the Patriots beat the Bills, the Chiefs are definitely the team if you had to choose between the Chiefs and the Titans.
Yeah.
Because I got to believe that those are the two teams that would more than likely be where the Patriots would have to face off against.
Yeah.
The Chiefs you'd want to avoid. Even with Derrick Henry coming back, the Chiefs, you just and I can think most teams want to avoid them.
Both teams are tough to play because Tennessee's had the Patriots number here a little bit, especially since Mike Vrabel's gotten there.
Yes.
I think the reason being is that they're one of the few teams that can beat the Patriots at their own game. They can outmuscle you. They can run the football. They're a good, well-coached, fundamentally sound team that doesn't beat themselves. So the Patriots love to play teams that they know, okay, we're going to win the turnover margin, we're going to win in the kicking game, the field position battle, and we're going to win all these little things so that even if, okay, maybe you have Patrick Mahomes and we only have rookie Mac Jones, but if we can beat Kansas City on the ground and we can beat them on special teams, maybe we can bait Mahomes into a pick or two, then we have a chance in this game. Tennessee doesn't beat themselves. And Tennessee plays sound in all three phases of the game. They're very Patriot-like. And it's almost like staring themselves in the mirror in a lot of ways. And I think that makes those games very difficult for the Patriots to win because they can't just sit there and count on Ryan Tannehill throwing them the game. He's not a quarterback that does that against them. He does that against other teams sometimes, but he doesn't do it against the Patriots, it seems like. And Vrabel has a good feel for what they do, and especially, I would say, what they do defensively. Since he played in the defense, he really understands some of the weaknesses of Bill Belichick's system and some of the core fundamentals of Bill Belichick's system. So that's always a tough one.
So who would you want to avoid?
I would still want to avoid Kansas City because I just want no part of Patrick Mahomes in the playoffs. Yeah. I just feel like every time they play Patrick Mahomes, even when they had Brady, at some point in time, he scores 3 touchdowns in like 5 minutes. Like, there's just no avoiding it. And the Patriots in the first half against Kansas City, in 2018, they played Kansas City in the regular season, and they played them again in the AFC title game. They shut out Mahomes in the first half in both games, and he scored 30 on them in the second half in both games. There's no stopping Patrick Mahomes. You can only hope to contain him. So that one scares me just because, at least against Tennessee, maybe you get into a 17-14 rock fight. And that game you could squeak out at the end somehow. You make a few more plays in the fourth quarter than the Titans, and you can outlast them. Kansas City, you got to win the game in the 30s. It's got to be a game like we saw in the 18 championship game where Brady and Mahomes go back and forth and the Patriots ultimately win in overtime. I think they scored 38 or 37 points in that game to win that game in Kansas City. So you're not going to win that game. You're not going to win that game 21-17. You're going to have to win that game 35-31. And I don't know if this Patriots team is ready offensively to win a game like that, especially if it's going to be in Arrowhead, which to this date, I haven't counted, but I've been to a lot of NFL stadiums, been lucky enough to go to a lot of NFL stadiums over the last couple of years. No stadium is louder than Arrowhead. It's not even close. I've never been to Seattle. That's the one that I hear could potentially change my mind on that. But I've been to Buffalo. I've been to a lot of places with crazy fan bases and rabid fan bases. I have never heard a louder stadium than what I heard in Kansas City. That place is, and it's not even a dome. It's an outdoor stadium, and you still hear the fans, and the whole place just shakes. It's just crazy. So I don't know. Look, Mac played in the SEC. He played at Auburn. He played at all these big places, LSU, whatever. So it's not like he's totally foreign to play hostile environment.
He'll be prepared for it. Yeah. Sure.
I mean, he's played in Buffalo, obviously, but that is a loud stadium, and that's a really tough team to beat in a ball control, good defense, run the football, play well in all three phases, complementary, all the things that Patriots have represented this year. I don't know if any of that matters against the Chiefs. It just feels like none of that ends up mattering as much as they harp on it year in and year out here in New England. Mahomes just feels inevitable, like he's going to put up 30 at some point, whether it's the first half, it's the second half, it's whatever. It's going to happen at some point.
Last question. What would be considered a successful season at this point right now?
Yeah.
And what would be considered a disappointing season? Are we past this
I
becoming
don't
a
think we can
disappointing
have a
season?
disappointing season. I'll say that with the caveat that I know Boston, and I know that if they lose and they don't play a good game,
So if they
on
get
Wild
blown
Card,
out by the Buffalo Bills,
it will be a disappointing season here.
Okay.
100%. But I think all of us cooler heads will eventually prevail in saying they had a rookie quarterback that won 10, 11 games in his rookie season, got them back into the playoffs. And this is not a finished product. They still have moves to make, and they still have things that they need to fill out. And they don't have a number one wide receiver, a true number one wide receiver. They don't have some guys at the linebacker and cornerback positions. I think are going to be areas that they're going to try to work on in the offseason. Left tackle with Isaiah Wynn is a little bit up in the air, and maybe they could upgrade that spot as well. But the number one thing is that number one Devontae Adams, Jamar Chase, Tyreek Hill, superstar wide receiver. Wherever they find it for Mac Jones, whether it's the draft, whether it's a trade, whether it's free agency, it doesn't really matter at this point, but they've built the roster up so well in every other area, it feels like, but they are feeding Jacoby Myers the football. Jacoby Myers has 107 targets this season. It leads the team. It's double everybody else on the team. And I looked this up last night. And Jacoby Myers, there's 27 receivers that have wide receivers I'm talking about that have 100 targets or more this season. Jacoby Myers is 25th in receiving yards among 27 guys. So he's got all the targets in the world.
Yeah.
But he's not putting up big numbers off those targets. He's going to have over 100 targets and under 900 receiving yards on the year.
Yeah, that's not good.
That doesn't happen.
No,
right?
that's not good.
Yeah,
and that's your number one guy.
Yeah, that from a statistical standpoint, Jacoby Myers is their number one receiver in the offense, and I look at that spot in their offense. That Z role, that Z slot role that he plays is the Troy Brown to Deion Branch to Wes Welker to Julian Edelman. That's the role. So Wes Welker has the Patriots franchise record for receiving yards in the season. He had 1,600 receiving yards in that role in 2011 or 2010. I forget which one it was. Troy Brown's Troy Brown, right? One of the greatest Patriots. Deion Branch won a Super Bowl MVP. Julian Edelman's Julian Edelman and also won a Super Bowl MVP playing that role. That is the most important role in the Patriots offense, is that slot receiver. They're so good at getting that guy open. They're so good at setting that guy up for success. And I think the biggest reason why Jacoby Myers is not putting up more yards in that role is because he's just not a dynamic ball carrier. Yeah. He's not a dynamic route runner.
I don't even think he's a slot receiver, to tell you. He shouldn't be a slot receiver. It doesn't really...
He's just not...
He's not built for the position.
Edelman, those guys when they got the ball in their hands, they were punt returners. They were literally punt returners. So when they got the ball in their hands, they were yards after the catch machines. They
very
were
quick, in and out of breaks.
Quick, subtle, good contact balance. Like they were almost running backs where they could just run with the football for days. And you have highlight reels of years past with those two guys and Julian Edelman's making a guy miss and then running for 70-yard touchdowns. And Wes Welker has the Patriots' longest touchdown from scrimmage in their franchise's history. I think it was 95 yards in a game against Miami in 07 or 09 or something like that. And those types of plays, Jacoby Myers just isn't going to make.
No.
He's not going to make a guy miss and then take an 8-yard route and turn it into a 60-yard touchdown. Edelman and Welker and Troy Brown could do that. Deion Branch was more of a vertical guy out of the slot, and he was very, very explosive. He was somebody that could get up the field. Myers isn't going to be that guy either. So if you look at
if you think about it, it's not even just Myers. It's the fact that, and nobody's saying Myers isn't going to be a good complementary piece,
right?
But there's nobody. There's like not one player that's really on this roster as far as the receivers really complement what the Patriots need to do when they envision this is our Super Bowl team.
Yeah,
they need at least two more impact receivers, if not three, if they really. And I'm not saying number one guys, but just complementary pieces.
Yeah,
the types of guys that you're talking about.
So I think they like Kendrick Bourne, and I think he's done some good things for them this year. So if Kendrick Bourne's their number 3 receiver on the depth chart, I think they would feel pretty good about that. Aguilar is a guy that, look, that X receiver role, that outside boundary receiver role for the Patriots, they're never going to target that position a lot. It's just not the way the offense is built. They want to live in the middle of the field. They want to throw to tight ends. They want to throw to backs. They want to throw to slot receivers. They don't want to throw outside the numbers. And Mac doesn't have the arm to throw outside the numbers anyhow. So it's not really a spot that you want to invest. To me, I don't care about the investment there. Mm-hmm. So Aguilar at least brings some speed and some downfield vertical ability. So pay him $10 million to go run wind sprints out there. I don't care. Like, just let him go take the top off the defense. And occasionally, once or twice a game, maybe he gets behind the corner and Mac throws one up to him and they try to hit a ball down the field. But most importantly, that Z role, that slot role, getting a guy like an Edelman, like a Welker, that's going to have 140 targets and 1,200 receiving yards. That's what they need in this offense. And I think Mac definitely has the ability, just like Brady did, to feed that guy. Like, I think he's desperate to feed that guy, quite frankly. And Jacoby's a great example of it because he is feeding Jacoby. So,
well, you know who's going to be available is going to be Jamison Crowder.
Yeah.
Because of the fact that, by the way, the Jets are probably working right now to restructure or make sure that Braxton Berrios stays on the team in the future. And he did, obviously he was too young when he was with the Patriots, but he's proven that he's that type of little piece that you like to have on your team.
Yeah, the Patriots opted to keep Gunnar Olszewski over Braxton Berrios. And Braxton Berrios' first year with the Patriots ended up on injured reserve at the end of training camp. We call it the Foxborough flu around here. When they have a player that they like, but they don't necessarily have a role for him right away, they just put him on injured reserve at the end of training camp so that they can stash him for the next year. So they ended up doing that with Braxton Berrios. And then he came back in his second training camp, and he looked a lot better in his second training camp than his first. More explosive, more impactful, confident out there as a receiver. But then they brought in Gunnar, and Gunnar just took it by storm, especially as a returner. And it was kind of an instant Edelman comparison of, they're going to take this quarterback from Kent State and make him into a Pro Bowl player. And Gunnar was sort of the same kind of story. And I think that they just kind of latched onto that, and they ended up cutting Berrios and keeping Gunnar instead, and that the rest is history. Gunnar was an All-Pro punt returner last year. Berrios is probably a better receiver than Gunnar is. Gunnar might be a little bit of a better returner, but it'll be interesting to see those two careers continue. But I think the Patriots, and I hope the Patriots have bigger aspirations than Jamison Crowders and Gunnars and Berrioses and stuff like that.
For your number one guy. Yeah, it's no question. Yeah.
It's hard because I think around here, the Belichick apologists, the people that think that Bill can do absolutely no wrong, they'll say, they plucked Julian Edelman from Kent State as a quarterback and they converted him, and now and he's one of the best Patriot receivers of all time. And Wes Welker before that was with Miami, and all he was doing was returning punts, and they bring him to New England, and he's 1,500 yards every single year. They could just do that again. Like, why not just do that again? And I'm just sitting there, and they're saying, why pay Chris Godwin $20 million when they could draft a guy in the 7th round and turn him into the next Julian Edelman? And I just want to pull my hair out because it's like they don't recognize that they hit lightning probably multiple times throughout the dynasty. I mean, Brady is the
but Brady is the big reason for that, though.
Brady's the ultimate lightning strike, right? That's never going to happen ever again in the history of the league. But even guys like Welker and Edelman were huge once-in-a-lifetime type of transitions and pickups, and they cannot count on that to happen again. So they have to go out and they have to invest an actual resource, whether it's financially with money or it's another first-round draft pick on a wide receiver. Because I look around the league and I feel for Mac because I wrote his case for Offensive Rookie of the Year that I'm publishing on Thursday. And I looked it up and I looked at his receiving core and I said, there's no Pro Bowlers. There's nobody in this receiving core that's even had an 1,000-yard season in the NFL.
Yeah.
0. and he's still put up one of the better rookie seasons that we've seen in the last decade and got them to the playoffs, and they won 10 games, and they're a top 10 scoring offense and all this kind of stuff. Now, I'm not saying that Mac is going to be Tom Brady if they get him some help, but just imagine if they can find him his Jamar Chase, and they can find him that guy to put in this offense. They're already a top 10 scoring offense without that guy. So you add that guy into the mix, I mean, they're going to be even better, way better. So,
well, I think just taking a look at it, I think, look, forget Jamison Williams, because he doesn't even have to have that big game on Monday night. He's already going to go in the top 10.
Yeah.
So you're going to have the 2 Ohio State receivers.
Yeah, I love Olave. Olave, it seems like a Patriot receiver. So smooth, route running wise,
there you
smart,
go.
savvy, but also plenty explosive, right? Not just he's not just crafty like Jacoby Myers is. He actually has that burst and that ability to run. He reminds me a ton of Justin Jefferson, like just the way that he runs routes and the way he gets open down the field. So I would absolutely love Olave. Garrett Wilson's a good player too. Yep. I know a lot of people like Treylon Burks, but he's a lot like N'Keal Harry.
No way. Yeah. Is Treylon Burks a first-round draft pick unless he runs some ungodly time nobody's considering? Yeah. But the other guy, who I think is the forgotten guy because he got hurt, is Drake London.
Yeah,
and that guy has got a ton of talent. He's got good size. He's fast. And I don't know if he's going to work out because of the injury. So if he doesn't go to the Senior Bowl and he doesn't go to the workouts, he's going to be a kind of quiet, like first round draft pick because he's that good.
Yeah, I just want the Patriots, if they're going to go the draft route, I'm good with them going the draft route again at wide receiver. I know it hasn't worked out for them with N'Keal. It didn't work out with them with Chad Jackson when they drafted him 35th or whatever it was out of Florida all those years ago. It's never worked out for them in the top of the draft with the receiver position. They've really hit on one guy. Deion Branch was a second-round pick for the Patriots all the way back. And that was really the one receiver in the top 50, top 100 that they've hit on. So not a good track record there. But if they're going to do it, the thing they have to prioritize to me, along with obviously, I don't want another 4-5 guy like N'Keal Harry. If they're going to draft a wide receiver, it's got to be somebody that's at least in the low 4.4s. Like, I need some speed. I need some real speed, acceleration, athleticism. The other thing that I think
Dotson's fast.
Yeah, Dotson's a great option too. The other thing that I would really focus on as well is obviously route running ability. And I think that that's really where they missed the boat with N'Keal, is that he could never run routes. He never ran routes in college, and he can't run routes now in the pros. So they have to find somebody like a Justin Jefferson. A couple years ago, before that, they loved Calvin Ridley out of Alabama at the time. Somebody that's a smooth operator, that's got great feet, great route running ability, understands how to get open and create separation, and is athletic, and is kind of that total package of what you look for nowadays in an NFL receiver. And if they can go with that and they miss on that guy, then at least the process I can back it up, right? Yeah. The N'Keal Harry process, I can't back it up. He was not a good prospect in college, relatively speaking to the rest of the guys that were on the board at the time. And they picked him anyways because of a few highlight reel catches that he had at Arizona State where he went above the defense and caught the ball one-handed or something like that, and everybody oohed
and he had a couple of returns for touchdowns.
Yes. Yeah, he had a return where he goes all the way across the field, and you're like, in the NFL, this is not going to work. So why are we caring about this? Like, why is this a factor in this decision? So Burrow has Jamar Chase. Patrick Mahomes has everybody, right? Josh Allen has Stephon Diggs. All these quarterbacks in the top of the AFC. Tannehill has A.J. Brown. All these guys have their guy.
Yep.
They have their go-to guy. Some of them have multiple go-to guys if they're lucky, right? And the Patriots right now don't have that guy. And that really feels like the missing piece in the entire team. And I'm not usually one that's like the wide receiver, they need a weapon. I'm not usually like fantasy football. Like I don't really, I think offensive linemen are important. I think everybody
have to have someone though. Yeah. You have to have a guy. That is your guy. And it could be a tight end, but that's not where the Patriots, they have their tight ends, and neither one of those guys are that
game
guy.
breakers. Yeah. You look at, and I think the other thing that Patriots fans forget, first of all, they like to harp on the early Patriots dynasty years when Troy Brown and Deion Branch and Patton and Givens were their best. That was a different era of football. That was a different time in the NFL where it wasn't these high-powered, air it out types of offenses that were successful. But then starting in 07, they had Randy Moss and Welker. Then they had Gronk and Edelman. Then they bring in Brandon Cooks. And they always had...
Yep.
Brady is not Brady without Moss and Gronk.
Sure.
Like, he's just not. Like, those guys were transcendent talents that helped him win Super Bowls and helped him be successful and win MVPs. Mac doesn't have anything close to Gronkowski on this team or Randy Moss. They're not even in the same stratosphere.
Nope.
As those guys right now. And I'm not saying those guys grow on trees. Those are Hall of Famers, best at their positions, that type of thing. But at least somebody that is in that you can put in a stadium with Randy Moss and say they played the same game would be nice. Right now, they don't even come close to touching that. And that's a big problem.
Well, and then I'll give you a guy, and we're going to talk more about this when we get to the draft, obviously. But I like talking about it now because not a lot of people have their eyes on it. But you're talking about a guy that would be perfect in the slot and won't cost you a lot. You can get him some prop, more than likely, again, unless he runs faster than people expect, is going to be Jarrett Stearns from Western Kentucky.
Yeah,
and that guy lined up in the slot like 90% of the time this year. He's not big. He's about 5'9", 5'10", but just the production is just overwhelming.
Yeah.
And that's the type of guy that if can run in the slot, you can get him in the 4th round or the 5th round, more than likely. And then you add a Chris Godwin.
Right.
And you add a number 1 guy. Now all of a sudden you've got something. And that's what you have to do. I think it's not about the Patriots adding one receiver this year. I think it's about, like you said, maybe go out, break the bank, get one big guy, but then spend at least one draft pick in the middle rounds on another guy that can be a big part of the future.
Yeah, I know my friend Alex Barth, who I do Patriots beat with, loves Wan'Dale Robinson from Kentucky, who's another one of those.
He may not come out, though.
Yeah, he may not come out, but is, Alex always compares him to like Kadarius Toney, somebody that can just run with the ball for days.
That's what you need, yeah.
Yeah, those guys would be perfect. And you're right. Look, I think they have... I do think that they're one player away from putting this offense, the whole puzzle to this offense together in terms of that number 1 guy. Because I think Aguilar can play his role. He's not a game breaker. He's not a game changer, but he can play the role as the field stretcher on the outside. Mm-hmm. I think Kendrick Bourne has been a pleasant surprise and a really good pickup for them. And they do have Hunter Henry and Jonnu Smith at the tight end position, and hopefully get James White back as their 3rd down pass catching back.
So if you had to keep Bourne or Myers, who do you keep?
Oh, I keep Bourne. I mean, Myers is a restricted free agent. I'm sure the Patriots will just tender him and pay him $3 million to be on the team next year. Bourne is under contract they signed him, I think, to a 3, maybe even 4. I think it was 3, a 3-year contract in free agency last year. So he's going to stick around. The contract that's really killing them is Jonnu Smith. They signed him to a ridiculous deal. It was 4 years, $32 million guaranteed. So they're stuck with him for at least another season, if not 2. And that's going to be problematic if they're going to want to go the trade or free agency route and get a veteran receiver.
Okay.
They have this huge cap hit on the books with Jonnu Smith, and they can't move it. There's really no way out.
Are there any players on the team that they can move to open up space? That's worth something that a team would want.
So the one other guy I would mention, they have Isaiah Wynn on his 5th-year option. Okay. He has not been good this year. He's drawn a ton of penalties. He's struggled, especially early on in the season. He's rounded into form a little bit late.
How much is he making?
So his 5th-year option, I want to say, is almost $10 million.
Okay.
So if they feel like they could get somebody in the draft and replace him at left tackle with a rookie in the 1st round or something like that, and that makes a 1/3 of the money, then that might be one way to move some money around. But for the most part, their books are pretty solid. I mean, look, they're going to have to pay J.C. Jackson or make a decision on J.C. Jackson one way or the other. Dante Hightower and Devin McCourty are free agents. I think McCourty will definitely be back in some capacity. They'll probably pay him what he's worth and bring him back. Hightower is an interesting one. That he might be done. He might retire. and call it a career. So there's not a ton of wiggle room for them with the cap, I wouldn't say, unless by some miracle they can attach something to Jonnu Smith and get some team to bite on taking Jonnu Smith off their hands. But I think that's a long shot, that they're probably better off just trying to make it work with Jonnu Smith next year rather than trying to shop him or cut him and eat the dead cap or whatever the case.
So you think it's unlikely that the Patriots are going to be able to outbid another team for someone like Chris Godwin?
I don't think it's unlikely, because I always look at it and say, if you really want that player on your roster, you can make the money work.
True. But do you think the Patriots would do that?
No, I don't think the Patriots would do that, especially not this early on in Mac Jones's career, because I'm sure they still feel like this is a 4 or 5 year window.
Sure.
And there's really no reason for us to get desperate.
They'd rather try to take a chance with the draft.
Yeah. There's no, maybe in year 4 we get a little bit more desperate to find Mac a guy if we haven't found it yet. Yeah. But right now we don't need to hamstring our future cap by making gymnastics happen, cap gymnastics, just to get a guy underneath. I don't think so. But if they want Chris Godwin, they can pay Chris Godwin, and they have the money to make it work, especially if they structure the deals so that the cap hits are more down the road instead of hitting immediately on the cap. There's ways to do it. So I don't want to hear in the offseason, oh, we didn't have the money to sign Chris Godwin, because that's BS. Yeah. They definitely have a way to do it.
It's going to be look, that's the thing. That's why the last question was about whether this was in any way, shape, or form could be a disappointing season. We agree that that's not going to be the case no matter what happens in the playoff game. So then finally, because the other part of the question was, what would make this the best? Like, where would you go most realistically and say, okay, this is now really been the best possible scenario I could have imagined? Would it be just beating the Bills?
If they win a game in the playoffs.
One game. Okay.
Yeah, if they win a game in the playoffs, I think everything else on that is gravy.
Okay.
No one's expecting them to make a run this year. I think maybe we're expecting them to make the playoffs the way that they've made the playoffs, right? As a wild card team, and they get in and all that kind of stuff. So if you make any sort of noise in the playoffs, I think that's icing on the cake. That's the cherry on top for the Patriots.
It has to be now anyway, because I look at what's going on here with the 7th spot, especially in the AFC, and it's like, I'm sorry, if you don't make the playoffs, even as the 7th seed now in the AFC, it's like, come on, that you're a really bad football team.
Yeah.
So you have to win a playoff game nowadays with that 7th seed. So.
Yep.
All right, Evan. So next week, it's playoff talk.
Yes.
And I can't wait for that. And we'll see what matchup it is. We all hope, keep our fingers crossed, it's the Bills.
Yeah.
That'll be a real good one. So enjoy the game. I know it's a late one. Yes. So you'll be up late on Sunday. Post-game show on YouTube. Patriots Press Pass should go off around close to 8 o'clock.
Yeah, as soon as the kickoff, as soon as the final whistle blows, we'll be up on Press Pass. So it'll be fun.
Evan, appreciate it. We'll talk to you playoff talk next week.
Awesome. Sounds good, Greg.